of the Islamist movements today, they have been suggesting that at least the state is central. The state is central in, curbing the problems which are deemed as social problems. If we have the caliphate, we would not have these kind of problems. Yeah. So, is this kind of attitude counterproductive, in your opinion? Because, for example, in Kelantan, they have already have a bill that who do not attend the Friday prayer will have to be tried in the Sharia court. So, looking at this kind of developments, even if someone who has done an aggression in the Islamic tradition, in the Islamic practices, there is a justification that the state power will be used to curb these problems. So,
I have a very strong view of this, which not everyone agrees with. I'll try to say it clearly, and then I'll give you the other views of it. I think state power is strong and getting stronger, and that this is a bad thing. Now, others will argue, I have colleagues of mine who will say, really, you're missing the picture here. The bigger picture is that state power is waning, partly because of globalization, and partly because of the phenomenon that we call the failed state. Okay, so these people would argue, they'd say, Syria, Libya, Iraq, this is the norm for the future. They're imploding. They're fragmenting. And so don't get hung up on state power. Because in fact, what we're seeing in the conditions of the 21st century is that state power is under attack. And I think there is something to this. On the other hand, my view is that though it may be under attack, it is precisely one of the reasons why people are trying to reinforce it by way of response to it. And Malaysia was a perfect example of this under Mahathir with the whole economic crisis. In a sense, put up barriers, strengthen the state as against the rest of the world, etc. And I think that that if you to take a completely different example, I mean, and to state it very maybe too simplistically, I mean, the European project is in tremendous trouble. I mean, the European Union is really not in good shape. Whether you're talking about the currency or you're talking about public attitudes, etc. So what have we seen after decades of European integration? We're seeing the reverting to the kind of strengthening of the individual states of Europe. And I think in a way that's the same sort of thing that would be occurring in what we used to call the third world, the developing world. Now, that's one dimension of it. So I think state power is in fact fighting back and increasing against these forces of globalization, the forces of fragmentation, etc. Now, why is it particularly bad? It's particularly bad because of what I call the bureaucratization of religion. This is the attempt by states to appropriate things and become the sole controller and spokesperson of it. Okay. What was the classic example? The classic example was social welfare. As the European state developed, the idea that what we would now call sub-state groups, non-state actors, the church, charitable organizations, they would have provided the orphanages, they would have provided the help for widows, they would have provided even hospitals at the beginning. Then what happens? The state develops, the state takes it all over. National health, All the social welfare function becomes a function of state power. Now, that is being, in the same sort of way, that's what occurs elsewhere. Now, what tended to stay out of that a little bit was religion, but especially in the Islamic world, we're seeing the control of state authorities over religion increasing, and as it increases for the reason we said before. It's a way of not only controlling opposition, but of legitimizing yourself. But in so doing, I think it completely changes the nature of this, so that you have the Malaysian state saying, or the whatever, the Saudi state saying, this is Islam, this is not. And that is undoing the entire sort of diversity of Islam that throughout the centuries. So you know this, that throughout the centuries we do have ulama, we have sultans, we have ulama. We know there is a relationship between the sultans and the ulama, but we also had institutions like Al-Azhar, we had institutions like Sufi orders, we had various other educational, the madrasas, all of these which in a way you could argue were outside state power. And they provided for the different schools of thought, the vitality, the energy. To now centralize this, I think is a distorting factor for the vibrancy of Islam, and it just reinforces authoritarianism.
To push it further, could we look at this in the Foucauldian lens, making people disciplined by limiting the scope of knowledge, the relationship between our knowledge, and then people will only, people is only allowed to know certain scope of the used to be huge knowledge.
I agree. I think that's a very perceptive point, and even to add to this Foucauldian point, it's a kind of policing point too. It's the control of your thought, but it's also watching you. And this is beyond the pale. This is unacceptable. You shouldn't be thinking this. This is unacceptable. You'll be punished if you do that. That's powerful. That's really powerful, and to my mind, very, very deleterious, very, very negative. It does intensify that. You see this now, and I suppose in one way you have to be somewhat sympathetic, okay? So, one of the points of diversity, but also it's maddening, especially for outsiders, is this, for example, this whole idea of a fatwa. Okay, who can give a fatwa? And okay, classically, this can be given by any number of people. Any number of people it can be given by. Now, before the modern state, we also had attempts to kind of institutionalize this with the mufti of the republic, or the mufti, muftis of Baghdad or Damascus, etc., appointed by the imperial center in Istanbul. So you do have examples of this in the past, but the control wasn't as tight as it is now. But now, for reasons which the governments say, we have to stop these radicals. So the way we stop the radicals is we say that only these fatwas, only these people can give fatwas, only this can be done. That's an understandable impulse, understandable. But it's all part of that whole idea of the state saying, this is Islam, and really you shouldn't know that. And that's not Islam. And if you know that, that's unacceptable. I think in the attempt to stop radicalization, it really ends up reinforcing authoritarianism, which ironically creates more radicalization by way of response.
Okay, so thank you, Professor, for your time, and we all would like to thank you for your contribution
Well,
for
thank
this
you.
interview.
Thank you for these very perceptive questions. There are no answers, I'm afraid. But thank you very much.
Yeah, those answers are very helpful. Okay, thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.